Our third score in this group of dotted brev and longa evaluations is from Douglas. And, Douglas, I have really enjoyed looking at your submissions to the MOOC and, getting to know the scope of you as an orchestrator, arranger. And this is just really an excellent entry. And just, I really enjoyed a lot of what I was looking at, and the things that don't work could be fixed. So let's take a look at how this is all put together. You'll probably see that I completely reformatted the layout of your score because I just wanted to deal with groups of ideas of passages, and just it makes it a lot clearer for me to analyze your score and give you feedback on it. So let's start off from the very beginning. Now, I'm really, really up on this. I'm really for this kind of dynamic phrasing that you mark in here that is just so cool. So just going brum, bum, and then coming in just like with these hits, right? It's building back up to boom again. That is just such a cool idea. I think this is maybe this might be the only score that does that. There might be one or two more. I've got about three more scores to evaluate. Hopefully, I'll have a chance to do them all today. And but this is the first time I've seen this. This is such a cool idea, and it keeps the bass drum from dominating so much. Now, having said that, when the harp has to compete with a forte bass drum stroke, you're not going to hear it. That's it. It's gone. All right. So you're trying to keep things very, you're trying to score this so that the harp can be heard, and I really appreciate that. I mean, it's sort of possible in the way that about the second phrase of the middle, that beautiful adagio in the middle of Jupiter is sort of possible, right? So I'm not going to twit you too much about this, but I would say if you had A2 harps on this, you just barely might have a chance to hear a lot of this until you get to about here. And then, by which time if you have loud, heavy brass, lower heavy brass, it's just, the harp is really, becomes secondary to the point at which it might as well just not be there. And I hate to say that because this is such a cool idea, but I mean, you're kind of get a better effect here. Just say with possibly like with marimba and pizzicato in one of the lower string kind of thing, you might get the same kind of sound and still be more audible. Okay, now let's just check out all of the other things besides the harp. Which, by the way, there's some good harp scoring in this, and then towards the end, once again, you're going to run into the same problem that you do here. So if I forget to mention it, then that would be my estimation across the board. So, so the lower strings taking that same rhythmic approach, and here you've got your A and B flat stuck together just in the violas. So, and the an octave lower in the left hand of the harp. So I don't feel that this is enough, even if the harps were to work, right? I think you would need more support for that A and B flat idea. Maybe if you could tune some of your kettles to that, maybe that could be a softer timpani stroke, right? And then you could just lose the harp and not worry about it. Okay, so we get to here. And you have this crescendo here. I think that right here, if you're going to compete with these guys, just don't stint yourself. Just start right at forte, right? The same thing here. Just let it all be forte. I mean, I don't see the point of dropping to piano and like doing a crescendo to mezzo piano here, or who knows what, mezzo forte, when you've got so much force going on in your melodic statement. It's really going to, you can't count on your harps, right? So that where does that leave you with soft lower strings? And I just don't think that's enough, right? Okay. Now, here we go with our first statement. Bum, 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 bum. So bass trombone and tuba and bass clarinet in unison. And then we've got our contra an octave below that. So I think that that will work great. You have this kind of rock bottom sound down there. Now it's going to sound grunty, okay? Rather than kind of clear and clean, right? It's just adding all of these, adding all this texture of a kind of a growly sort of quality. Like if all you have to do if you want a clear, straight texture is take the bass trombone out, and then you've got that really direct sound of the tuba and the bass clarinet joining together, right? But like the gruntiness of the bass trombone is being underlined by the contrabassoon. This would be the greatest place of ever to add a contrabass clarinet, right? So if this were contrabass clarinet doing octaves with the bass clarinet, then I would say the bass trombone would not be too grunty, right? But it just is going to have that very kind of quality to this whole. The contrabassoon is going to bring out that more raspy quality in the bass trombone. So if that's what you want, yay. Yeah, and yeah, okay, this sort of works. Yeah, yeah. So that's all good. Okay. Okay, so now the contrasting of this melody is to go to trombones. Like, how many trombones? 2 trombones? Is this A2? And, is this... I'm guessing that it is just a single trombone and the 4th horn teaming up together, okay? And on the same pitch, right? Which is also... How many bassoons? 1 or 2, right? And then you've got your clarinets an octave higher. So the clarinet there was something very similar to this in a couple of scores ago. And, I'll repeat again what I said then, and that was that this may disappear a little bit, right? You might need a little bit more on this top voice in order to bring it out in the face of so much weight on the lower octave. It's still, though, it's a really cool idea. Just kind of wondering, like, this, if this were A2, then it would have that kind of strange phased sound that you hear at the beginning of the Tchaikovsky Fifth Symphony, right, where he's got A2 clarinets, and you hear that sort of phase. So that might be one way of making this sound a little bit more prominent, and also making it sound a little unsettling, to be frank. Then you could go A2 bassoons if you want more of the bassoon quality in this. Otherwise, the bassoons are the single bassoon added to horn and trombone is pretty much just a slight addition of tone weight and a slight rounding of the sound behind the trombones, right? So, but unless you go to A2 here, forget about meaningfully adding that to the combined tone here. In fact, the horn is going to slightly disappear as well, right? But if you were to go A2, the bassoons lend themselves to the tonality of the single horn, and then adding that to the bass trombone. But I'm still not convinced, or sorry, the tenor trombone, but I'm still not convinced here. I would say 2nd and 4th horn and A2 bassoons, right? And just add even more weight, because this is so huge. Do you know what I'm saying? This is big. This is going to be such a massive sound with tuba and bass trombone, right? And forget about the winds, right? They don't even matter in terms of tone weight and projection. So this particular, so this needs to be balanced. Because everything else is the same, right? Your accompaniment is the same. So the expectation of the listener is that this is going to have is going to carry this forward, right? Rather than being really loud and then a little softer, right? So if you want these to match in terms of weight, I'd say add another horn, A2 bassoons, and see if you can do something to make this a little more prominent, right? And then you have solved your problem. And then picking it up here, dun 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 dun, bum 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 bum. This is all really fun, and I like this sforzando here. That's very cool. Almost wonder if you could go, if you could have a little bit more weight to your reaction. All right, and you are tying up a lot of instruments here, really. By adding the bass trombone and so on, there are very few instruments left that can go, dun da da, dun da da, right? Because these harps are just not going to cut it, right? So I think here's where you need to bring out the big guns, like timpani, right? And maybe horns could pitch in here a little bit, but if you have sforzando with this many instruments holding this for that long, right? See, like you have all this support for that kind of idea, but you have almost nothing. Like the reaction is going to be very muted. To be completely honest about it, without turning up the harp, like treating the harp like it was mixed on a mixing board. So you're going to just need more tone weight to this. I noticed that you've sort of inverted the direction of the of these two pitches. So you're going bum 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 instead of bum 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 bum. Okay, well that's all good, but and you can see the logic behind this, because you can't reach too low with your lower strings, right? You cross beyond what's possible. But yeah, I mean that doesn't mean that you couldn't like turn this into sevenths and then this into a higher pitch, right? So anyway, there's ways around it, but I would just say you just need to have more of that. Maybe you could just reverse the direction with the timpani and maybe add the horns that aren't doing anything, and then you would solve that, and maybe even English horn as well, and then you would solve that problem without getting too high in pitch. Okay, now moving on. I just this is one of my favorite moments in the piano score. That bum 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 dun dun da da dum ba da 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 da. Yeah, and so like we need to know whether this is A2, right? These single pitches. Yeah. So yeah, Craig Hunter had a cool approach to this, which was to express these single pitches as unisons, right? So that you have the two of the same exact note on the same stem. That's one way to deal with that. Okay, now I like this, and there's a slight problem built into this, and that is I don't feel that this balances with the oboe, dun 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 dun, and you have this cool idea here, this rhythmic idea in the oboes, and you've tried to solve the problem a little bit by having these back off and then crescendo again, so that's sort of like mezzo forte in here, and then they both crescendo together, right? So that they're both forte. Okay. I mean, I'm just wonder if you couldn't just go like just forget about that, and have them both have the same dynamic level, right? And then I just think that would work a lot better, just because I feel that the beginning isn't going to balance no matter what. This is going to be, it's right where the overtones of these trumpets are going to, it's like the first place where they're going to hit on their way up is right on this octave, right? So I think these guys need to be a little louder. Not hugely, just a teeny bit. And this is neat, the dancing timpani, which we've seen in some other arrangements. And you are kind of supplementing that with left hand of the harp. And, this is just the point, you kind of give up on harp after this. And I think that's wise, right? That just kind of, even this is like not really contributing that much. These are neat, these little accents here. And like, it would have been cool if these could have been supplemented somehow. There's so much about your harp part that like would have worked like better on marimba, and I like here's a place where you could be using that marimba, right? Like just to like really underline this, or xylophone or something, some other kind of thing to just really make this just as pointy as possible against the cushion of this this lovely the way you fill in the upper kind of the upper register of the orchestra here. I really like this. This is just really, really cool. And then, and then we're joined from below by our horns. And and just really essential to know whether these are single pitches or A2, right? So, just in general, if people are going to go back over their work, follow Craig's example in doubling these guys in unison. All right, so that we end up with this big fortissimo blam, and then the sort of reaction of horror, or laughing, like ha. Okay. All right, now I think this is neat that like the motion is going downwards, but you add, you keep the upper register high, right? Like so piccolo, really barren here, and then then the contrapuntal motion below, and then flutes, and you're not overdoing it on the winds, so that's a really cool feature of this. I think it gets a bit thick in here with the clarinet plus oboe, right? Plus strings, right? See, here's where the things sort of dovetail into each other or telescope into each other, right? So the uniqueness of the wind tone color starts to get lost as we progress along, right? But I realize that you're setting this up, this stompy part up, but still, if there was any way to keep this pure, like to keep the descending winds pure until you got to here, you might have more of a sense of continuity along the line, But telescoping's not a bad idea too. I mean, this is a complex part, and I've seen some arrangements just take, just as complexify it up as much as possible, including mine. When there really are very few functions actually happening, right? So why should anybody have to get too elaborate with this? And so so there is some method to your madness here, okay? But then the stompy part, I thought this was good. The problem with it is that the little melody inside the stomping is not very strong. So you're going crash, 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 and you can barely hear da 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 in the mock-up. And your mock-up is telling you the truth. This is kind of interesting, that has been a refrain on and off throughout these evaluations that, mock-ups lie. Mock-ups often compromise on the actual tones and strengths of the instruments involved. But sometimes they really do tell you something, and that something is worth listening to. And here, I think this, bump, 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 da 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 dum. This is a really important part of that in the piano, and it really seems to be missing right here. I mean, it doesn't help that you've got this, bum, da, 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 bum, you've got this real, really active percussion right in there, right? So it could complement this, but if this were stronger, but it's not stronger, so it buries it. Right? So it's kind of crossed that line in that way. So if there were some way to bring this out a little bit better, I would be all for it, right? And especially as, like, the clarinet is being a little buried by the trumpets as well. All right, so if, maybe if there were not a higher voice, but a lower voice, like if the horns were doubling this at an, maybe basically playing the da 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 at an octave, then it might be good, but it might add more weight than you want to, right? Yeah, but I like this, this little polyrhythm going through. That is nicely scored. Okay, so just that's just my gripe right in there, is that I can't quite hear that. I can't hear it in my mind when I look at this very well, and I can't really, and the mock-up proves me right in that way too. I will say one thing. It's really cool to see such a high pitch. So that's like one of the highest normal range timpani pitches is that high A, right? So before you go to the piccolo timpani. And it really has a great tense sound if you're using the highest normal kettle, because it's like it's at the top of near the top of its range. I think you can go up to B flat, but a lot of timpanists would say, look. I mean, even the A, I might want to play on a piccolo timpani where I can have more bounce and less actual tension. It's not just the tense sound, like the tense emotional sound, but the actual tension of the drum head. Anyways, but really, really cool. I love that. All right, now we get to the actual first real treble part in the piano score, and and this is all really effective. You don't need to mark you don't need to mark this. The players know, right? And I think that you have to say whether or not this is divisi, right? At the beginning of this passage. So it's a little, I would say it's a little long for for this kind of. I mean, it's a pretty fast piece. So yeah, so I would say at least say divisi, lose the bowing marks, and think about this. Do you really want to go da 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 da, or do you want to go da 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 da, right? And then just single bows, bum bum bum, right? Because remember, this is like a way of tying up the end of the phrase, right? So the more forceful it is, it's like the more you are bringing things to a close. Anyway, just allowing my personal preferences to color this a little bit. But yeah, but just watch out about like going, one short note, then a really really long phrase with with the alternate bow, and then a very short note. What's going to happen is that these notes are going to tend to be, if this is played the way that it is, they're going to really stick out because the up bow is going to be really strong, right? And then the down bow is going to have to be gentler in order to last the length that you're asking. So what the players will do is they'll just like make it all one bow. So they'll just go up, up, down, down, up, and then they might just add a down bow right in here, whether you like it or not, right? So better to do things in smaller groups where the player has more dynamic control, right? So in this case, with a crescendo, they might just want to do the entire thing up bow, or they might want to go down, up, so that they can push into this stronger, right? And then they might want to go down, up, down, up, down, right? So there's just a bunch of different ways to do it. So I would just say don't try to outguess them. Just score it a little bit more lyrically. Okay, that's enough lectures on scoring. And we just have very simple functions once again between the two hands. What I would say, I would critique this a little bit, is that you have the lower part of the left hand function really well defined, really well transcribed, right? Bass clarinet and tuba, and then an octave above that you've got, I'm assuming this is first or second horn. You didn't mark which instruments are doing what a lot of the time, but that's all right. But we don't have the upper part of the left hand represented by anything but viola, right? So we're missing out on a dimension of the music. It's not really coming through very clear in my mind as I look at this, or on your mock-up. So I would say adding something to here would really make a difference, okay? And this is really cool, this little passage in here. Okay, that's really neat. I have no problem with that. Nor do I with the harp. Okay, I think that's kind of cool. That whole bram with things sort of jumping back and forth. This is all cool. No problems. But look, mezzo forte. along with forte, you should either make them both the same dynamic or reverse it, right? Because the strings will disappear under forte without crescendo in the trombones, right? They're just not there, right? So I would say either mark them both forte, mark everybody forte, including the piccolo, or and then the harps fortissimo, or you could mark your brass. You could just keep them at mezzo forte and have the strings be forte. Okay. All right, now moving on, you chose to turn this section here into a woodwind chorale, and a lot of arrangers have chosen that particular strategy right at this point, and I think it's great. I mean, it really is made to be that kind of style because it just really has a wonderful kind of almost a baroque style, like but like not in the actual, not the actual counterpoint that was used in the Baroque period, but just the sense of interplay of voices is really nicely expressed by woodwinds, right? And then I like the way that this appears to wrap up, and then right under it you've got your ba-do-da-da-dum coming in with the trombones, same thing again, ba-da-da-da-dum, and then everything else sort of continuing and just kind of taking this little bit of glue between the two sections as a way of continuing things on. And I think that that's all pretty effective. There's nothing that is too out there. I would want to know whether this was A2 in both parts or whether this was like first and third. All right. If it's going to be first and third, cut this and make this first and second. Okay, just really try to have a default that when, unless things are really separated by extreme contrasts of register, that just really count on the first and second as being the best partners at any given time to express an A2 idea. All right, so I would say cut this, put this A2 if that's if you just intended to have two horns there. All right, and then continuing on, how much of this could just continue to be A2 with the horn, and then just have the little extra pitches be played by the third and fourth horn, or have some sort of combination of them, kind of trading off. Okay, and then we have that wonderful descending thing, and this is going to be very big and fat and band-like, the way that you've scored it. Okay, I'd say flutes here should be supporting the piccolo at an octave higher, really. I mean, I know what you're trying to do here. If you really don't want to give the game away too early because of the way the pitches rise, then the piccolo, get rid of the piccolo, elevate the flutes, and then add the piccolo towards the end. Do you see what I'm saying? Like if you want things to really have more of a build up to here. Otherwise, flutes are in their, you might hear the C, but the quality of the flutes just they don't really have anything to add here. When you consider the weight of everything else going on, the trumpet, the oboes, the flutes are just not going to be heard, right? So I would say fill this in, bring it up an octave, and then you have a much more secure overall tutti with winds and brass. Okay, this is really fun. The snare roll ending with da-dum. I think that's cool. And then the timpani, same thing, forte piano, boom. And then I really love this da-da, 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 bam. Okay, and that's all pretty well scored. Good placement of registers and throughout the instruments. Now you got some red notes up here on this B flat and C, but that's going to be okay. Sforzando for the players just kind of going for it up there. It's going to be all right with your C trumpets. Okay, so I like this. Let's take a look at the next page. So here we come back to the recap, which I think I might be wrong about this, but I believe, hang on, I'm going to just scroll back. I want to check something. Yeah, so that was A. This should be B. And this should be C. if I can just ask people who are like following this these challenges and who are coming back year after year, if you could just keep my rehearsal marks, please, just the way that they were. I'm not annoyed about it, but just it just helps me to keep track. You know, if I set up a certain system of rehearsal marks, that helps to place me, because you have to think, I'm sitting here and I'm like, I'm remembering registers, I'm remembering transpositions, I'm trying to put into words everything that I instinctively grasp just looking at a big score like this. It's actually harder for me to explain what's happening than it is for me to just immediately see, just at a glance exactly what everything sounds like and what everything is doing. So if you guys can help me out by not changing around the rehearsal marks, like you might have accidentally deleted it, I don't know, or maybe I did, who knows? But I've noticed that in some scores, people have changed around what the rehearsal marks are. So, some of that is just because I didn't make public the template. But anyways, if people could kind of stick to this, to the original rehearsal marks, that would be so helpful to me. Okay, so now we start to get going on this. And then I'm happy that this poco stringendo lasted through this, because it really does make a difference when you hear Douglas's mock-up along with the score, and you see the music start to just slowly, get more and more life after the recap. Okay, so now how much does this recap work? I'm happy to say it works pretty well. If you were to maybe not make it so harp dependent, right? Like if you really wanted this harp to come through here, then I would say cut everything back to piano, right? Just like forget about Meno F, make this piano, make this pianissimo, right? Make these guys piano, and then make your harp like forte, right? Then you would hear the harp pretty well, right? But you can't keep doing that because like the music wants to take off, right? It wants to go do things. So I would say better to score this idea out like this is an example of like dropping the piano part onto the harp, right? And this is sort of playable. I would have to go through all of the different pitch information to see whether or not there were any pedal changes that were hard on the harpist. But I would say try not to do this. Really try to avoid, just dropping the piano information into the harp part. Like make that like anathema, right? Make that like a place where you will not go. And I would say, especially in your case, Douglas, because you have really great chops. You got great instincts here. You were obviously on your way to, to turning out pro orchestrations. You may already be doing that, and maybe what I just said was just horribly condescending. And if so, I apologize. But yeah, but just don't score harp. Don't make the harp into the piano score if you can ever, right? Unless there is something that is particularly harp-like about it that could contribute in a very featured way. But here it's accompaniment, right? And like, unless it's accompanying like glittery little flutes and celesta and stuff, it's going to get buried. All right, so that's all I'm going to say about the harp, and I apologize if I'm going on and on about it, but I just really feel it's important to know. And I think the next piece that I'm selecting for the challenges for 2019, it could definitely end up with way too much harp too. So I'm going to try to put a limit on that. Okay, so we got our cymbal, like hanging over cymbal here, and let's just pretend that this was all sort of scored out pizzicato and there's going to be no balance problems. All right, and we'll just move on with the actual scoring. So this is really nice, da 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 da. I like that. This is really cool on piccolo. So this is going to have a very folk sound, and that is the right way to do it. Muted horns at mezzo forte. It's going to have a nice balance. And then you have your flutes, the paired flutes. Now I'm wondering, like you have just these single pitches. I wonder if there's like a way of expressing these as intervals as well, so we don't lose that sense of the notes working against each other. Despite Bartok maybe only using one pitch in places. If you could just end up like with seconds all the way through, so that the two players maintain that level right? And then, if we, sorry to get back to the harp again, this could possibly be scored in another wind instrument or in the violins as pizzicato, and then you have, you have better support, right? I mean, the harp could work if this were just flutes, right? But like once again, you'd have to rebalance everything. Okay, clarinet coming in, sort of imitating elements of what happened before in terms of that approach with the now the other horns muted, and the oboes taking off. I really like all of this scoring in here for winds and horns. I think it's really, really fun, and there could be a little bit more filling in here. Then this is really cool. The bassoons, you're trying to balance this out. Have the horns on top and the bassoons on the bottom. This should be A2, and it should be nice and loud, right? And then these guys need to back off. You might even want to score these piano, or maybe cut the accents so much, right? Or both. And then you can bring things back up to a louder dynamic here when the bass clarinet is added. And I think that this is nice. The way this all crawls down, that's a good way of solving that problem in there. Okay. And then we're getting to the poco stringendo part. Flutes kind of doing their little bip 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 bip, and just dancing back and forth between these two things. Timpani starting to do, like, I just really love the distance between these two pitches. It's almost like two different instruments. And then bassoons coming in spots to double the cellos. I think that could have started earlier. I know you want to bring this to an end, right? And then just have there be some difference, like when these guys enter back in. But look, if you just drop them to piano, then that's great. And I think that this is wise too as well, to have a dynamic, to have a really decided dynamic difference here. Moving on to the final page, we just see piling on, and the piling on is pretty good. Clarinets plus flutes, it's okay, it's fine. But when you're adding in the oboes, and you wisely drop the clarinets down an octave, right? Because if you were just to add all three of your upper wind instruments, your main upper wind instruments together, it would be better to the flutes could just drop out at that point because they won't be heard. But flutes plus oboes on those pitches, that's all right. All right. And then everybody's kind of doing stuff, just this kind of just doubling and adding things, and all that. And then, of course, the harp is just like, whatever is happening here, that should be in the pizzicato or arco in the strings. This just is not going to come through. You cannot rely on that. And then, bum 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 bum. I almost wish that you could have gotten another octave out of this. Do you know what I mean? I mean that this could have gone even higher. Everybody could have just really gone for it. Now, this isn't going to work for concert trumpet players, right? That is just too high. So maybe if there's a way of holding back one octave so that this could be the highest octave right here, then that would work with the anticipation rather than just repeating what came before. This timpani part is really going for it. So I think the timpanist can do it, but they'll have to they'll have to have their timpani placed in a certain way. So probably they'll be staggered. Like a lot of timpani parts are staggered. So it's almost like looking at the horn section with the lowest on one side, the highest on the other, and then the two middle kettles switched around. So if that is what's going on here, then it's really easy for the player because they can go, left, right, right, and just kind of going across both drums. So yeah, so if you are a timpanist, then pardon for my timpani splaining. You already know all this. Okay, and then once again, pretty nice tutti chord. Don't see any big problems with that, except of course the trumpets can't really play that high. Yeah. Almost wonder whether or not the strings, as the music got louder, could have just gone simply to octaves, and just played, B flats and E's, because and that would give much more force to the sound of the strings. You know, you'll still hear everything else balanced. The whole idea of seconds balanced really, really well. But you know, it might be better just to leave out the extra pitches in this situation. Okay, now we're cruising to the end. I just really love that in the original score, and people are coming up with great ideas, and a lot of them seem to be doing a lot what I did, you know, after the stroke, that final lower stroke, to just have a very soft, kind of bell-like decay. Yeah, I mean, it's another strong argument for having two harps. In this, you know, mezzo piano, forte, please. Okay, because, you know, the decay of the hall, of the concert hall after this, will be louder than the decay of the harps, right? If they are played mezzo piano, or the harp if it's played mezzo piano. So I would say two harps, fortissimo, and then you will get the effect that you want, that you're expecting here. I would say like the harp here is just, you know, unless you're playing the very top octave. If this is as high as it can possibly go, it's not going to be heard. Yeah, like almost never try never to have this on a tutti with the harps playing an octave below the highest pitches. Like, you know, here you're really going way, way high, you know, just all the way up to that really high E flat. And, you know, like matching the piccolo. That will work with good players, right? And of course, these are going to have to be divisi. There was almost no divisi marked anywhere in the score. But yeah, that's going to have to be divisi. And if it is divisi, it would be better to have like all the players, you know, all the firsts on the top octave, all the seconds on their top octave, you know, and then the violas taking the bottom octave, or the bottom of this octave, right? And then you will get the most power out of the strings. Now the cellos could be divisi, that's fine. Or you could have the cellos, keep the cellos divisi, have two staves on the double basses, and just have like the firsts, you know, the first desk, or the you know, half of the players play, you know, the top divisi play the lower part, and then, you know, just add, you know, this is going to have so much support from, you know, from the low brass and percussion and so on and so forth, that like the double basses here are not necessarily superfluous, but they really, you know, they can get away with being shared between sections if you wanted to do that. So that would be the way to get the most strength, the most force out of your string players, and, you know, and the most string sound going up to match this piccolo part, right? So that is all sort of possible, especially this slower tempo. Yeah, and then, you know, you just have to rewrite this. You could go up to the B flat and then just do a unison on this E flat, and then the overtones will give the illusion of that high note there. Okay, so look, nicely scored. I could go on and on about this score. Really, it gave me a lot to talk about. But even at that, Douglas, you know, you have got some skills here, and you know, I just really, you know, if you are not really committing yourself right now to orchestration, I would say commit yourself more. It's you know, you obviously have some chops, right? Under development, or they're already there, but this is a genre of and this is a style of orchestration you may be less familiar with, whatever. But I would just say, you know, think about some of the things that I said, and I would, you know, God, it would be great to have you in the next challenge. You know, just, you know, I've yet to see a score where I thought, well, you know, I don't really care whether or not this person is in the next challenge. But, you know, all the more so when people are putting so much effort into these challenges. You know, I mean, it would be great to have a dozen rather than a half dozen. Have to have a dozen full scores of the next challenge. And I'm saying that, and you know, my future self is saying, "You fool! You know, you've given us too much work." But that's all right. Okay, so thanks again for this score. So I'm gonna break a little bit for lunch, and then I will be back for more fun, and I think I'm gonna be able to get all of these scores done today. You know, it's gonna be close, but I think I'm gonna get it done. So thanks again to everybody, and thank you to Douglas, and I will see you in the next video.